there's a lot of around leadership. I think there's been hundreds of books written about leadership. But if you stop some random person on the street and ask them what they know to be true, I'm not quite sure what they would say. If you look at Deloitte, if you look at McKinsey, if you look at PwC, any of these firms, you will find they are all expert-led. In other words, the people at the top of these organizations, the senior partner, will have been in the firm for the whole of their career. And that's the irony, really, is that what they practice, they don't actually preach when they go to other organizations.
All right. Welcome back to the Better Human podcast. Like usual, we have amazing guests. We have Amanda Goodall today. Amanda, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. We're going to have an amazing conversation about leadership today, and we're going to get into your research, and we're going to talk about your book. And you told me you're traveling right now. You're doing some work out in Germany.
Yes, I'm in Germany right now. Yes, in Bonn, which used to be the capital of Germany, of course, many years ago, which is now moved to Berlin, back to Berlin.
Yeah. One of our partners and offices is in Saarbrücken. So, I've been out there a few times, which is amazing. It's an amazing, place. All right. For the audience, let me tell you a little bit about Amanda. All right. Amanda, is, worked in the fashion industry. She moved to India when she was 23. She did a lot of projects out there. But in 1997, she completed a degree at London School of Economics and worked with Anthony Giddens, director of LSE, as part of the top management team. After a year, she returned to Chicago with the president of Warwick University. And based on her experience working with the two university leaders, Amanda started her PhD at Warwick Business School in 2004. Her research was published into Monograph by Princeton University Press, Socrates in the Boardroom, Why Research Universities Should Be Led by Top Scholars. But what we're here to talk to you today is about your new book called Credible, The Power of Expert Leaders. This was released last year, June 2023. Credible presents a powerful argument for why expertise really matters and how leaders who deeply understand their industry and organization make all of the difference for success and happiness of people who work there. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So why don't we kick off? Tell me about the research that you're doing and sort of where this began and what it's led to.
Sure. So, having worked with university leaders, I observed that there was differences between those who had continued with their research and those that gave up their research very early. And so that was kind of motivation to ask the research question that went on to be my PhD, which was, who should lead research universities? Should they essentially be good scholars or good managers? And I found at the time that universities outperform others when they're led by people who did not give their research up very, very early. So to me, this was a very strong pattern, and it sent a signal around core business expertise. Because research universities, obviously research is massively important, as is teaching. But if you give up quite early, then it has an effect on the way that they lead. So I decided, when I did the PhD and I published it, in the Princeton book, I wanted to see if I could replicate this finding in other settings. So my motivation for this was, I think there's a lot of bullshit around leadership. I think there's been hundreds of books written about leadership. There's 100,000 articles, journal articles of leadership in the title. But I kind of often say, if you stop some random person on the street and ask them what they know to be true, I'm not quite sure what they would say. So I wanted to see whether I could find, or develop a replicatable pattern across lots of different settings. Now, I wasn't so ambitious at the start, but soon after doing the leadership book, I published a paper with co-authors, economists, one in Cornell University, looking at basketball coaches. And we found the same pattern with basketball coaches. The coaches who had played in the NBA or who were all-stars were far more likely to lead their teams to greater success. And from there, I looked at Formula One racing. I've looked at hospitals, and that the hospital work has actually sucked me into healthcare a lot. And since then, in short, I've now looked at every single industry that you can imagine, and I've found the same pattern. Now, it doesn't explain everything about leadership, but I'm pretty certain that I know that people who have spent time in an industry, who have worked their way up in an industry, who have expertise, core business expertise in that industry, make better leaders for their organizations. And we know this both in terms of the performance of the organization, and we also know it's in terms of the job satisfaction of the employees. And I can go on and explain more about that when you're ready.
So, I mean, it kind of answers to the whole point of where you have these hired guns, right? The hired CEO that comes in from a different industry and they roll into the company. And in my experience, personally, they don't last. I mean, it's almost like almost this 2-year marker, which is they get in and, 2 years later, they're leaving. The organization isn't that much better. In fact, it's probably even worse because of the change that they've gone through. So is that what the pattern is that you've really discovered, which is like this whole coming in from the outside might not necessarily be the best answer for leading the organization, like really growing up in the industry? And as you said, if you were a Formula One race car driver, your ability to lead the team thereafter, or if you were a basketball player, your ability to lead that basketball team, your success in leading the group, not just from the output, but from the culture and the happiness is the answer to all of this.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's, that's been found now across a lot of settings, well, all settings. There's a study that we're just publishing at the moment, which looks at, every single, it's a Danish data set. And in Denmark, they have this amazing administrative data where they collect information on every single company in the country of Denmark. And we've looked at this across every single company, and we found, again, the companies perform better when they're led by people who work their way up in the industry. So the apocryphal kind of person who started off in the post room, the kind of classic American hero story, that kind of person, who doesn't really exist anymore, but that kind of person is the kind of person you want. And you want someone in terms of things like healthcare. You want doctors to be leading in healthcare much more. And I've been really sucked into healthcare in a big way. And that's evidence. There's many more papers now. But when I first did my first study using American data again, I found that the hospitals that were, ranked highest were more likely to be led by a physician than a general manager. And of course, you want a good physician. You don't want a bad physician. You don't want a dodgy physician. You want someone who is actually good, who becomes a kind of exemplar for the organization, sets the standard bearer. Other people want to join that organization because they've got someone really good at the top of it, etc. Now, one of the questions that we wanted to try and understand was, in our jargon, we'd ask, what are the mechanisms through which these expert leaders seem to take their organizations in a better direction? And there's a number of things that have come out, which I can go through, but one of the most important things is job satisfaction, actually. So we looked at this with bosses in US and UK data, and we found that, and this was 35,000 employees who were matched with their firms. And we found that if their boss had worked their way up, started the company, or was considered as a technical expert by the employees reported far higher job satisfaction and were much more likely to stay in the firm. And if you think about it, the person that has the biggest effect on our lives in terms of work is going to be our immediate boss, our line manager, because they are the ones that make the decisions about, whether we get promoted, whether we can join a development, leadership development program, for example, course with you. Whether even when we can go on vacation, actually, they control so much about it. So we found that the old adage about people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses, to be true, essentially. So that's one of the ways we think that the most important way that we think, and we've replicated that now in lots of different studies, finding the job satisfaction under bosses who really know what they're doing, is much higher. So why would it matter if your boss could do your job to a good standard, or really understood the nature of your work? Well, if you think about it, we want a boss who we think that person is really good at what they do. I want to aspire to be as good at a lawyer or a doctor or, whatever it happens to be as my boss. And also, importantly, your boss, if they understand what you do, can create the right conditions for your work. They understand what you do. They're going to create the right conditions. They're not going to give you lots of bureaucracy and lots of crap. They'll be able to use their judgment to help you and to assess whether the conditions are right for you to perform your job to your most capable ability.
Yeah. You ever see the show Undercover Boss?
Yes, I did. I have seen it a long time ago. Yes.
But the whole premise of the show is that you get these executive level leaders making decisions, and it's usually like a franchise type of organization, or there's some retail or customer service facing front store, and these individuals will be making decisions around the business, right? And the whole undercover bosses, they go in undercover and they work these frontline roles and jobs, and you see it instantly where like early they start to realize like, oh shit, like the decisions we're making have no application in the real world, or what looked good on paper is actually creating more of an issue, which affects the bottom line. And it's only as per that experience, which is their ability to operate with more of that intuitive decision making, which is even though the paper or the process is X, I've actually been in the field, I've been in the job, et cetera, et cetera. And this is specifically true for some more trades, right? More of those technician type of roles where you are problem solving and thinking through your workflows in the field. And, unless you've lived that experience, it's hard to make that, to give that guidance, right? When it comes down to leading and managing people, it makes a lot of sense. I got to tell you, it kind of flips the whole world of leadership training on its head, which is, this generic leadership training course is going to be the one size fits all. And, there are some very large, leadership training or, companies out there where they have a generic approach. And I see this happen all the time with clients where, they're like, we have our internal facilitative leadership program, or we've done situational leadership. And then the first thing I think is, how's it going? Right? How many people are actually applying and utilizing some of these concepts, or was it a little bit of a check the box exercise? So, I mean, is it a problem in universities now that they are learning generic leadership approaches and methodologies?
I would say there's lots of business schools around the world, including very top business schools, that have kind of recognized that the MBA is not as popular as it was. Now that's probably for different reasons, but partially, I think maybe there is a bit of a recognition that as you said, the bosses that move around a lot, and there's lots of other people who've done research on this, the ones who move around a lot with the MBAs have often got the biggest salaries as well, because we know that when you move around, your salary gets increased, etc. But I think there's a lot of evidence now. Well, I would say from what I've done, I've set up a course for doctors, a 2-year part-time leadership development course exclusively for physicians. And what I wanted to do was to create a safe space so that physicians can critique themselves, hold that mirror up to themselves, really sort of get into uncomfortable conversations with each other and support each other through them. And I think that's best done with that group. For us to think that everyone thinks the same, that all professional groups are in the same kind of work settings, etc. In a way, it's bizarre. Management training never started like that. It always started, different professions had their own kind of management training. So I don't know how we got here other than through, even though I'm in a business school, I think business schools really went for the generic stuff. And I think my business school now is supporting me in tailored management education. So not just the doctors, we're doing one for creative industries now, etc. And I wonder whether that will roll out more in other places.
What's the uptake with the physicians? I mean, in my experience, the physicians have usually been the hardest to get in the room for leadership training, right? It's everyone else, the healthcare administrators, the nurses, that's who we end up sort of working with. And when we try to get in quotations, the doctors into the leadership training, there's a lot of sort of pushback. So how's that been received for you from this demographic?
Yeah, very interesting. In some ways, some people thought it was politically incorrect to have a course just for doctors. So, there's in the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, there's some kind of little bit of push and pull between the different professional groups. Now, nurses have had sold leadership development training for over 30 years in the UK. With doctors, I think one of the things, and this is also applicable to the United States, with doctors, often they are not incentivized to go into leadership positions. Often they're actually paid less in leadership positions than they would be when they do their clerical work, which is a big issue. And yet, as the evidence keeps rolling out more and more, that showing that we need clinicians in leadership positions, and particularly physicians, maybe organizations will incentivize their doctors much more. Because I think the doctors, what we've got, we managed to collect amazing data. We've got data all the way through the program, which is now in its 7th year, showing interviews with the doctors on the course, their line managers. And we know exactly how they're progressing, how their behaviors are changing, how they're becoming more strategic in their thinking. We can document all the way through those 7 years, the movements of these doctors into leadership positions as well. We know their promotions and everything. So we've got amazing data. So I think it's partly the problem of the organizations, the hospital settings, or whoever it is, the healthcare providers, that they're not creating the right conditions that incentivize doctors to go into leadership positions. I think if you do incentivize them, and doctors realize that actually, although they're particularly patient focused, they're the most patient focused, I think, than anyone actually, because they have so many years of patient focused education, that when you explain to them that actually by going into leadership and management position, you can actually influence the outcomes of many more patients than you can just the sort of, the small handful that you see on a weekly basis. But I think, more and more that there is more and more, and certainly in America, more and more articles coming out about physician leadership, more and more evidence coming out showing that you need physicians in leadership positions. So I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't change for you in the future.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, from a patient care standpoint, that patients might end up receiving better care, because when you are in a leadership position, you're now thinking more about not just the business side of things, but the entire workflow and process and quality of service and delivery. Yet if you're just on the pure clinician side, you can get stuck in just that prescriptive approach. I mean, this is very, very common in Canada. You go to the doctor and the doctor says, here, let me prescribe something. There is no dialogue. It's, how do I get you out as fast as possible? And there's no pressure, or there's no motivation to provide that quality care above and beyond. And I don't think doctors have a bad intention. I think, as human beings, we all get caught up and used to the way we do things, right? And traditionally, physicians have really been trained and taught to diagnose and prescribe. And, I'm in Costa Rica now, which I was sharing with you. And medicine down here is a business. So the doctor owns the business. And I've had a couple issues over the last year and a half. I broke my knee. I just recently had to have back surgery. And I got to tell you, like, people said to me, why don't you go to Canada for this? It's free. And I'm like, I got to tell you, I'd rather pay for it here, because the quality of not just the treatment, but the relationship that you have, I feel like I'm dealing with an account manager who has an interest in me beyond just the surgery, right? And it's quite amazing at the communication. So how much do you think, or how important is it for maybe these clinicians and physicians and doctors to operate these healthcare practices as a business?
Yeah, good question. And it is interesting, because I've been talking about America, but Canada has actually massively got a big movement on physician leadership as well. It's got a very big organization. I've talked in Canada many times on this topic, funnily enough. The business element is important. And there's all sorts of debate, as you can imagine, around healthcare about how much financial incentives should be built into the system. That's been done in the UK, tested in the UK at different times. And there's always this kind of misunderstanding, in a way, that people who are intrinsically motivated, like doctors, are not also extrinsically motivated. There's been a kind of, fantasies about the idea that doctors aren't motivated as much by money because they're really focused on patients. And of course, most people who know anything about medicine will know that's not true. They're extrinsically motivated as well, like anybody else is. Doesn't mean that they are less motivated towards the patient. But that's why we teach them the business stuff, because exactly as you say, once you give doctors the tools, one of my big issues, and I know this is happening in Canada, I know it's happening in America, Europe, is that obsessive use of management consulting firms. I find it, way too much. And we give so much money, public sector money, to management consulting firms. Very often I hear from my doctors that the CEO of the hospital system, mainly general managers, not doctors in the UK, that they brought in some management consulting firm at huge cost who comes in and is supposed to know how to make things better. It's this endless stories of them coming in, shuffling around, going, and then everything just goes back to where it was obviously they probably do help in some circumstances, but the number of complaints I've heard over the years about this. Now, why do we think that a doctor who works in these systems all the time, they're clever, they're well educated, or a nurse or anyone, why do we think that they're not going to be able to see how to solve a problem themselves? Give them the tools to make that possible. Of course, they're going to see the problem. They work in there daily. They're going to see how they do it. Just like you can see, probably you can take ideas from outside about how you want to improve your education business, but you're the best person to know what of those ideas will work for you and which ones won't. Now we don't do that with them. We kind of infantilize them a little bit. And by bringing in management consulting firms, it's the ultimate infantilization, and it costs so much money. So I think, give them the business skills. It is also about making money. It's about, the best healthcare, but let's not forget that it's also about money, and that even in the NHS, which is, this thing that's so important in Britain, the doctors still do private work. They still make money privately because they need to boost up from them. The money they make in the NHS is paltry in comparison.
Right. And I see doctors and physicians tired, right? Like you're maxed out at what how many people you could see, what you can earn, specifically in Canada, right? Because, the US, it's a 2-tier system, Costa Rica, 2-tiered system. UK and Canada are very similar in their healthcare systems, right?
Yes.
It's call it government run, and healthcare is free. But is it? Is healthcare really free? And, to that point, are we getting the best quality from these physicians, which, as you said, the whole intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, every human being operates with both. It's not like doctors are numb to extrinsic motivation. And I might argue that with the extrinsic motivation, there's an effort and an exercise to deliver better service, to deliver a better care, better quality.
Yeah.
They did a study years ago because I'm sure you know this, a hospital is a P&L, right? It's a profit and loss. And the question comes down to, how does a hospital make money? Well, the more beds that they're turning over, the more money the hospital's making. And they did a study to see, how do we get people better, faster? So how do we get people to recoup or recover faster? And there was a number of factors that went into it, but one of the key data points was the bedside manner that they receive has a direct connection to their recovery rate, right? They heal faster. And if you notice who's giving the bedside manner, it's not the doctors, it's the nurses, right? So it's something to be said. It's really interesting, the research that you're doing, and, through this exercise, through your work, acknowledging the fact that, the more the doctor is running the business, the better system or healthcare business or provider they will be.
Well, I will give you one example as well, which I use a lot, and that is that every year there's these world rankings, and every year there's American rankings, etc. And the one that comes top of the world rankings every year is the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic, if you know both of those. And both Mayo and Cleveland have only ever been led by doctors. And they are not for profits, but they make extraordinary profits. They make a lot of money, which then they buy back into the business. But they have only ever been led by doctors, and they are number 1 and 2. And I think that speaks volumes, actually.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of work or done a bunch of work with stem cells this year, or last year. And the clinic is run by a group of doctors, but one specific who started the business 10 years ago. And, was a little bit of pushback back then, which is, you're crazy. What is this going to do? But he's the physician running the business, and he still practices. But his main role is running the business. And I got to tell you, this outfit and the business itself and the experience you go through is AAA, like mind blowing. And again, the only way I describe it, which is as you said, there's a doctor running the business, and their ability to have insight on how to make decisions within that business, is is more than anyone else. Like they could hire a CEO to come in. And by the way, they have a president. They have a president that runs the operations, but he's the CEO. And it is that leadership that is being given to the executive group, which is creating an insight. So I totally agree with the work that you're doing in the research.
Funnily enough, also, Greg, we're doing a study right now looking at, I'm doing it with one of the doctors who's on our course. He's in health tech, and we're looking at the companies that survive. We're just collecting the data now to see how well companies do when they have clinical physician involvement at the senior level. So we're actually looking at that, in fact, that question. And so far it's pointing very much in the direction of you do need it at the senior level. But we're still unpicking all the evidence right now. Yeah.
What are some other key data points that have come out of your research when it comes down to the expert running the business?
So some of the reasons that we think that it matters at the organizational level is that experts are more likely to take a longer view of an organization. So if you look at the organizations that have been around for many years, if you look at the ones that are less likely to turn over, to buy and sell and grow and move around all the time, you find that experts tend to be more solid leaders. They'll take the long view. And that's partly because their obsession on profit, actually maximization, they're not, quite as obsessed. They see it as a long-term thing. One of the other areas is that we see that, if you've got an outstanding expert at the top of the organization, so for example, if you're a basketball team, if you were a stem cell firm and you had an amazing researcher, or you had an amazing basketball player, you had someone, who exemplifies the best of that field, whatever that field might be, we find that really contributes to attracting great new staff. So staff want to be places where they can see there's someone fantastic at the top. That's a standard bearer. That was actually originally said to me from someone who was the former dean of the Wharton School, Patrick Harper, who's been in banking actually for a few years. And he said to me in an interview for Socrates in the Boardroom that the standard bearer has to first bear the standard. And I just thought that was an amazing concept and an amazing quote. It's true. You would think the organization's head would set the standard for an organization and direct the strategy towards achieving the best of that organization. So I thought that was a fantastic quote. Other factors that we looked at, the signaling effect of having that expert, as I said, really does attract people, creating the right environment in the organization, and creating an environment where you've got job satisfaction among employees, which is really, really important. Those are kind of the main factors. And we found that now in so many different data points in different work environments, both in healthcare and in a vast array of businesses, that if, the job satisfaction's high. And there's lots of evidence to show that if employees are happy, they are more productive. That isn't my work, but there's numerous, different kinds of studies now, experimental, longitudinal, showing happy workers are more productive, which kind of makes sense, in a common sense way. So these are some of the other ways in which we think that experts contribute to the performance of organizations. But it's difficult. I find that there are more generalists in the world than there are experts. So that's always a bit of a fight. People don't necessarily want to hear this in certain settings because they think, this isn't good for them. So in that sense, I feel, it's a push to get this message out there. Within certain areas, I can definitely feel, even though the irony, say, of management consulting firms, if you look at Deloitte, if you look at McKinsey, if you look at PwC, any of these firms, you will find they are all expert-led. In other words, the people at the top of these organizations, the senior partner, will have been in the firm for the whole of their career. And that's the irony, really, is that what they practice, they don't actually preach when they go to other organizations. They try and convince them that they'll sell them, that they understand their organization, and yet they would never let you or me go into their organization and tell them what to do. So there's a deep irony there, I think, and that kind of exemplifies some of the battle. But I would say it's getting out there. And I think, interestingly, with AI, this will be more, poignant, actually.
I was going to ask, so does this apply to sort of the general corporate world? Like, let's say a marketing agency executive leaves to a different industry, call it CPG or call it some sort of manufacturing environment. They manufacture widgets. The expertise factor of being in the industry, is it the same rule that applies there, or does that start to shift a little bit? Because I could understand things like the basketball player and the doctor, but versus just the corporate executive that moves from industry to industry.
Yeah, it really does. It applies very, very much so right across industries. And in fact, cars is an interesting industry. And there's been some great books about what happened to the United States car industry, which was so important. And a lot of that evidence suggests that it was when in the United States, they separated the kind of experts, the engineers from the management level. They put in this management level, in the sort of the 30s and 40s, it started to happen. And the Japanese, on the other hand, were still practicing the form of kind of engineering management that the Americans had introduced post-war, interestingly. And, this divide happened. And I think a lot of people see that the Detroit car, the Ford, of many years ago that started to weaken in its product and be taken over by Japanese cars. Japanese cars have always been very active. The teams, the management's always been very active, as close to the coalface as possible. And that's been the whole way of working. And I think American car manufacturing has now emulated that a bit more and gone back to that. But no, I think it really matters everywhere. I think, there's certain areas, there's certain fields, for example, in sales, where there's one study that shows that people that are really involved in selling things don't necessarily make the best CEOs. But across the other fields, it's absolutely about people who really understand the core business. Now, the core business shifts. Some firms might buy other firms. And people say to me, oh, but what's the core business in a firm that's, morphed into many firms? And I would say there's evidence, not my research, but my colleagues' research showing that in mergers and takeovers, that those companies that survive the best are the ones that, where the organization that's acquiring the firm has a great understanding of the business of the firm that's being acquired. So that's also as relevant in acquisitions and mergers as it is in the kind of research area that I look at.
And you see in acquisitions and mergers, when it's a completely different industry and company buying that other company, it usually goes to shit pretty fast because they come in and they push their processes and management styles or organizational processes, which just simply don't work. That other company. Yeah. And what you were talking about with the car industry, I don't know if you've ever read the story of Toyota, right? There's a book on it which describes exactly what you're talking about.
I haven't read that one. But yes, I have followed. In the book, I actually follow Honda and Toyota quite a bit. And also there's a great book called Crashed, which was written about the American car industry by two American sociologists. It's not my area of expertise, but I found it fascinating reading about it.
Yeah. Super, super interesting. Very controversial, as you said. A lot of your arguments or a lot of your research is pointing to the fact that if you want to be successful in a leadership role in this business, you've got to grow up in the business. And you brought up sales leadership. I mean, that's very true. In my experience, it's very rare that the sales leader is able to run or manage the sales team if they haven't been a salesperson themselves. Specifically within that business and within that type of sale or product, right? Because, you just don't have that frontline experience, right?
Exactly.
It's a little interesting, which is, hey, pick a path and who you want to be in life, and make sure when you pick that path, you're going to want to stick it out in 20 years because that's going to be a lot of the foundation for success within that organization. Very cool. Yeah. Very, very cool.
I mean, I do think that, it's, some people get really pissed off because they think I'm here on this MBA class and you're telling me that, I've come on this MBA class to change my life, get a new career, etc. And you're telling me that I can't. And I mean, of course, if you want to change career, you've got to be able to change career. But the main thing I would say to arm yourself is just be really aware of what you don't know. Don't assume that you can step into a new organization and do that. Make sure you've got someone who's with you all the time who really understands it. Go in there, really trying to learn about how, how the place works, what people want to be successful, etc.
I do guest lecturing usually once or twice a year at with some MBAs. I was recently out with some tech MBAs, and I was just reminding them, like, it's unfortunate the attitude you're developing with going through the MBA, which is in a lot of cases you are the most close-minded people I've met, which is I've done my MBA. This is what it should be like, right? And I had this one individual in session last week where I was looking at her and I'm like, good luck to you in your career, because it is going to be a very rough road for you with your current mindset, which was, I've done my MBA and now I've got it all and that's all I needed and that's what's going to matter.
Exactly. And I think that's showing. I think that's being recognized, actually. And there's some interesting studies coming out now looking at firm performance. There's one particularly interesting study, which I can't remember the author's name, and it looks at firm performance and whether the CEO has done an MBA or not. And it finds those who are led by an MBA CEO perform less well than those not led by an MBA CEO. So I think there's going to be a lot of stuff like this coming out, to be honest, Graham. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg.
I had a coaching client a few years ago being groomed for CEO, ex-McKinsey person. And I said, why do you want to do coaching? And they're like, we need to coach the McKinsey out of him. And I was like, okay, I get that. Right. And it wasn't that we want to negate that, but it's
no.
His success was not going to be because of the McKinsey background. It was going to be because of his developments in regard to being a CEO. Awesome. Amanda, if the audience wanted to learn more about you, if they want to follow you, if they want to check out your website, if they wanted to pick up your book, how do they find that and how do they find you?
Yeah. So I've got a website, a personal one, amandagoodall.com, and that's got all my research on it. It's also got stuff about the book. It's also got my email, my mobile, my inside leg measurement, etc.
Amazing. So amandagoodall.com for the audience. And what about Insta? You're on Insta. Here we go. I found you. Amanda Goodall.
I am on
Instagram.
You now. Actually, no, I'm not really on Instagram. I'm on Instagram. I started off and I'm pretty shit on Instagram, to be honest. I would not bother looking for me on there because it's not very satisfactory. Obviously, LinkedIn.
I was going to say LinkedIn is probably a better platform for you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, listen, all these social channels, it's like a full-time job.
It is. It really is. It really is.
All right. I just connected with you on LinkedIn and Instagram. Yeah. So when you see that, you'll connect back.
Okay.
All right. For the audience, don't forget to go check out amandagoodall.com. You can find her book there. You could find more information about some of the work and the research. Amazing research that you're doing. I take my hat off to you. Research and staying the course with this type of exercise is a commitment, and the world needs more researchers and thought leaders in this type of domain. And as you said, when it comes down to the world of leadership, there's over 100,000 articles written. There's thousands of books, and really, who do you listen to, and how do you digest that? At the end of the episode, we come to the better human question, which is, what do you think we could all do to be better humans? But I'm going to change that to, what do you think we could all do to be better leaders tomorrow?
I think I'd say the same thing as better humans, actually. And I would say, I think the word self-reflect is maybe a little bit overused, but I do think I'm an advocate of psychotherapy. I'm an advocate of coaching. I'm an advocate of people being aware of their behavior. So I think to be better humans, I think we just have to be aware of our own behavior and the effect that we're having on other people. So I would say that's my that's what I think.
That's amazing. Awesome answer. Amazing. Amanda, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Really interesting.
Thank you for inviting me, Greg.
All right. To the audience, if you like today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And as usual, what we need the most is some reviews. So if you love today's episode and the show, go ahead and, give us some stars there. Let us know, ideally 5. And of course, share this out. The more we're sharing this information out, the more we can start to contribute to everyone else's success. Stay happy, stay healthy. We will see you at the next episode.